So, hello, everyone. Welcome to our new episode of Yale College Voices. And I'm here with Anita Sharif-Hyder. And I'm going to read your bio here, and then we'll get started. So, welcome, Anita. And thank you for taking the time to do this today. I really appreciate it. Anita is the associate head of Trumbull College and serves as the associate secretary for the university-wide committee on sexual misconduct at Yale. Anita has degrees in psychology and counseling from Syracuse University and Towson University. She's also she also has an international background and is multilingual. Anita is of Bangladeshi origin and born in Thailand. She's lived in Venezuela, Kuwait, Egypt, and India during her formative years. Anita has applied her cross-cultural and counseling backgrounds in higher education administration, initially at the International House of Philadelphia and Kaplan Incorporated, and then for the past 15 years at Yale University with the World Fellows Program and the Provost Office. Anita lives in Trumbull College with her husband, Famid Hyder, who is also the head of Trumbull College, along with her two kids here in New Haven, Connecticut. So Anita embraces hospitality and celebrates cultural traditions in service to the vibrant and diverse Trumbull College community. So thank you, Anita, for joining me today.
Thank
And
you.
I'm just happy to have you here and be able to speak with you today. So I wanted to get a sense, and we've met through the Emerge program, the Emerge Leadership Program, and which was a wonderful program, and it was a wonderful opportunity to get to know you. Hard to believe that we've been working in the same building all these years and never crossed paths, really. And I wanted to hear a bit more about your background, growing up, leading into your college years, and then we'll talk a bit more.
Well, thank you. And, it truly is a pleasure to be in conversation with you, Doris. In terms of my background, so I'll start from the present and work my way backwards. So, I have been in the U.S. for 30 plus years. I came to the U.S. as an international student. You mentioned Syracuse, and then for graduate school also. But I'm what you would call, the quintessential immigrant, and I've kind of lived that immigrant experience. I was fortunate growing up where, because of my father's profession, he worked for the United Nations, so we had an opportunity to travel and live in different countries, and that certainly influenced my sense of self, my identity, and my place in space in the world, so to speak. I found that from an early age I had an affinity and comfort level with just being in different environments, surrounded by different cultural traditions and people, with an ease that was pretty natural. And maybe that indirectly informed sort of my educational and professional path. I'm an outward-facing person, and I think, I derive my energy from being around people. So, getting a degree in psychology just in terms of, at its core, relationships, interactions with people, and just sort of what makes us who we are as human beings, right? And, I've been in higher education administration for most of my professional career, but always kind of adjacent to academia. And I've been at Yale now for 15 years. And, my current role, at the provost office within the UWC, but, more recently, the role at Trumbull, which has really allowed me to sort of kind of utilize all my training, both personally and professionally, in this kind of new setting.
Awesome. So I'm curious, we spoke a while back or over the summer, and you explained how your experience in college affected you in terms of how you either mentor students or help students through difficult situations. And I'm wondering if you could tell me a little bit more about your college years and how that has brought you into
Yes.
today.
Well, if I could redo, I totally would.
Right.
But only in my memories can I do a redo. But, when I think about my 18-year-old self, and obviously what I know now as, semi-formed adult, mother of two teenagers, 17 and 19, right? So what I reflect on is, my courage and comfort when I was 18 through 22, let's say my undergrad years, like how trusting was I or being able to kind of seek out and ask for help or just be more forthcoming and proactive in finding resources that I would need to support my educational experience. And I didn't have the wherewithal probably or the comfort level or just the basic knowledge of how to kind of access different kinds of resources. And obviously in this day and age, because, talking about 30 years ago, I mean, there's just so much more available at your fingertips. And we are more robust as a society, right, in terms of, knowing where to find things or who to ask. Over the years, as I went through my 20s and 30s, and I was entering spaces where there was opportunity for, more collaboration and within a university context, because the infrastructure is there, where there are, there's a place for X and there's a place for Y. And if you can't find it at X, you can go to Y. And then there's people or intermediaries along the way who can kind of point you in the right direction. And that kind of support structure is something that I appreciate now. And I'm also mindful of in terms of how I access different resources or how I can connect people and resources together. If I could speak to, just one of the things that I intentionally bring to the work that I do in all facets is, it takes time to establish trust. And whether you have an interaction with someone for 5 minutes or over an extended period of time, how do you nurture and cultivate that trust? And it takes a lot of effort. It takes intention. It takes authenticity. And it means, just really being human and genuine in those interactions. Because you don't know if you will encounter this person again. And so why not make those 5 minutes impactful? And hopefully when you've moved on from that interaction, there's something that lingers or stays. And it could manifest, down the road, but that's okay. Right? So,
absolutely.
So for me, just establishing trust, being able to acknowledge and hear and support in a way that's genuine, I think is something I try to embody and impart.
Awesome. That's great. And I remember when we spoke over the summer that, we talked about the first few weeks being associate head of college and, what your intention would be as students arrive and, they're in this new environment and embracing that part of the hospitality that you'd like to offer students. So I was curious if you don't mind sharing maybe some memorable experiences you've had over the last few weeks.
Yeah, sure.
Anything
well,
that
we
stands
moved.
out?
It's been 2 months, but I think, I'm a voracious or raging extrovert.
Yeah,
if you can't
awesome.
tell. But there's a certain kind of energy and vibrancy just being obviously, right at the heart of
Mm-hmm.
of the college.
Mm-hmm.
And not only are you interacting with students on a daily basis, there's, the staff, there are folks at the dining hall, and then
Mm-hmm.
like people that you kind of have those fleeting conversations as you're passing,
Right.
like in the courtyard.
Mm-hmm.
And there's the parents and fellows and colleagues. So it's kind of this wonderful mashup of energy.
Mm-hmm.
And what's even more exciting is that I think this year we're kind of back to the before times of
Mm-hmm.
like, what it felt like pre-pandemic, right?
Right.
Just
Mm-hmm.
kind of really taking the time to have as full an experience as possible.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, the first-year events have been lovely
Mm-hmm.
with the receptions and just kind of the welcome that Famid and I have been able to host.
Mm-hmm.
We've had a wonderful series of events during the month of September at the house. One notable thing that I wanted to highlight, which is memorable for me, so I do a lot of interfaith work in the community, and I've been doing so for the past 10 plus years between Muslim and Jewish communities.
Oh, wow.
And that's something near and dear to my heart
Mm-hmm.
in terms of what it means to be a bridge builder, literally and figuratively,
Nice.
and a connector. And just again, with the backdrop of the world in which we live, I think these kinds of relationships and conversations and allyship is really important. So for Yom Kippur, we hosted our first Yom Kippur dinner,
Oh, nice.
and it was a beautiful kind of evening. It was a wonderful turnout, and the previous head of college and her husband, co-hosted the event with us. So it was really, again, very symbolic in terms of, showcasing our faith traditions, but in this setting of hospitality, breaking bread again,
Yes.
literally and figuratively for Yom Kippur, which was just a highlight.
A while back, over the summer, we talked about how you'd like to bring parts of your culture into the Trumbull College community. And I'm wondering if you could share if you've had a chance to do that over the last couple of months, or maybe in the future months. Any exciting plans?
Yes. We have talked about sort of ways of introducing a lot of what we love and enjoy in kind of celebration of, our kind of new role at the college, and obviously for anyone and everyone that we encounter. And, I think at its core, our philosophy is like, once you open the doors, everything is welcome, and vice versa. That's something that we also want to embody and provide. So it's still the first year. So a lot of kind of learning and seeing what has been done in years past, or also understanding the pace and rhythm and flow of college life, knowing that there are peaks and valleys. And, right now being October, we're kind of in the heart of the semester, and there are midterms happening, et cetera. But there are little spaces and opportunities where we can introduce a little bit of nuance and how we curate the event. So obviously this kind of mashup of the Yom Kippur celebration is one example. For the future, one thing that I'll give you a little teaser, actually.
Great.
I also discovered that during the pandemic, I've always loved and appreciated poetry. I mean, that's something that is something that I go to, like a quote or a small poem. I have a lot of books on poetry that sort of nourish me and give me a little uplift when I need it, and it kind of provides a little grounding and reset as you go throughout your day. And during the pandemic, because all of a sudden there were all this vast amounts of quiet time, I decided to put pen to paper and just, write my own thoughts, and it just kind of poured out of me, surprisingly. So I started to write poetry and some short stories, etc. And it's kind of picked up in a way where now I'm like, this is something that I want to continue to do. And I'm sure even you, Doris, there's a poet within you. So knowing that, like, wouldn't it be wonderful? And I think knowing that we have a group of 100 plus first years, within those 100, there are some poets and quants in the mix. Yeah. So why not put an open call out to just do like a very intimate Trumbull poetry jam or celebration or whatever. Yeah. Still have to come up with a catchy name.
Oh, that's great.
And have an open call. And obviously first years, but upperclassmen as well. Just to have kind of an open mic, poetry, read your own, showcase somebody that you admire. So that's in the works.
Awesome.
And we're hoping to launch that in a few weeks.
Nice.
And then obviously, the hope and how I envision this unfolding is if we have a couple of first years take initiative, and it can continue year after year until these first years are seniors, what a wonderful thumbprint and legacy they will leave behind.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it can be something that is carried on from, if it's a first-year initiative, like it's something that will carry with them for the 4 years. And that's sort of what I envision.
I love that idea.
And obviously in terms of cultural celebrations, in the spring, there will be occasion to celebrate Ramadan and Eid. And the breaking of the fast is a wonderful opportunity to break bread, appreciate sort of the sacrifice that we kind of go through during the month of Ramadan, but again, over a meal and kind of reflection. So we hope to have some of those events at the house, for example. And at the end of Ramadan is the big celebration of Eid. And again, everything revolves around food, which is obviously fantastic and awesome.
Absolutely.
So I think there will be a lot of food featured.
That's great.
And, when you think about hospitality and community, like when you're seated around a table, like sharing food, that is just so, it's such an effortless and natural way to share in something that's mutually enjoyed.
Right. Oh, that's awesome. I love the idea of the poetry night. And, even in my mind, I started thinking, wow, wouldn't it be great to publish, have something published each year from,
that it's funny you say that because that also would be a wonderful sort of byproduct. Like, why not at the culmination of each year's kind of poetry, and it could be once a semester or just once a year, however it unfolds, like a mini publication.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so I'm noodling with that idea as well.
Yeah, that's great. I love that idea. And
wouldn't it be nice? Let's take it a step further. Like amongst our kind of orbits of people, colleagues. And I know you interviewed Daisy, who's a poet.
Yes, exactly.
So why not have an open call and see, because we know there are writers in the, like informal, amateur, not trained, but just as kind of like almost a hobby. Like, wouldn't it be wonderful just to have an evening where we just share in spoken word?
Absolutely. Yes, I'm in.
All right. Start writing.
I love that idea. I don't know if I could be the writer, but
You could be the curator.
I could be the curator.
Yes.
I'll help you with the tech stuff. Right.
Please.
All right. But yeah, I do love that idea because, like you said, it can bring people together in a different way, outside of the meetings and
Yeah.
the actual work that we do, but also, our interests and you, after having a conversation with you over the summer and Daisy as well, and Daisy and I recorded an episode yesterday, and it's nice to get to know people outside of a project, outside of the actual work that we do, but just getting to know people and talking to people, which I feel like after the pandemic is kind of still missing in terms of our offices, because our a lot of folks are working remotely or hybrid, so they're we're sort of missing each other in the elevator. We don't get to see each other as often except through Zoom meetings, and it takes away that that personal interaction. I was just thinking the other day how and I don't know, maybe they could bring this back in some shape or form, but years ago, when we had holiday parties in the dean's office, we did the gift exchange, and some of it was, it was fun. It was actually fun just to see everyone and gather for an hour or so. And we still have the holiday party now, but I think the gift exchange, because they were funny gifts, some of them were,
Is it like the white elephant?
Yes. And guess what? I'm the one that got stuck with the ugly bowl. There was an ugly bowl that kept getting exchanged.
Yes.
And I have this ugly bowl sitting under my desk right now that, now we haven't had a party like that in a long time, but I have to get rid of the bowl somehow. But no, it was fun. I think it was fun, and for staff who were brand new
during the pandemic when they started. Yeah.
And a lot of folks are shy. I think in some ways it at least gave people an opportunity to just see each other in a different, away from work, and let's just celebrate together. And so yeah, I love the idea of having, a poetry night or, something that gathers staff outside of the actual day-to-day stuff that we do. So I was curious about, I know that you are a huge supporter of DEIB and our advisory committee. I wanted to get a sense for, your thoughts on, well, what should we sort of tackle first, or what in your mind, what do you, what are important initiatives from your perspective?
Sure.
And in a year from now, what would you love to see the committee to have accomplished by then?
So I serve on the subcommittee within the provost office, the DEIB subcommittee.
Right.
So I'm now on year 3. And to your point about sort of how we are as staff and colleagues and at all different levels trying to navigate a hybrid workplace.
Right.
And things kind of get lost in a Zoom context. And yes, you can have like the initial chit chat before everybody hops onto the Zoom meeting. And even when we're in person, there's also a sense of, okay, well, we are in the office. We have to kind of be efficient and productive and, make all of our meetings and still have time for like the face-to-face interaction. So, these are kind of complementary demands that we have to maintain on screen and hybrid, and then also in person. So, what does it mean to really, bring intention to every interaction, whether it's on Zoom, whether it's in person, and we don't really have kind of the time. And, what I am also very mindful of is those fleeting interactions. And I spoke to this earlier. It's that if I have 2 minutes with you, whether on Zoom or in person, how can I make that exchange meaningful? And it speaks to going a few layers deep, like that question, how are you? Or how are you really?
Right.
And for somebody that you're meeting the first time, yes, there's some kind of pleasantries in exchange, but if I can bring to that conversation something that might not be focused on like the task or project at hand, like, oh, so where are you headed to after? Or, how was your ride in this morning? Or something a little bit two-dimensional in the conversation, that can open up so many possibilities, right?
Right.
So in the DEIB world, obviously we are kind of looking around more broadly as to who's at the table, who's being invited to the table, how are authentic and true conversations being had, and even when that is encouraged, is that being received and welcomed in the way that the commitment or initiative behind it is actually measured or invited, right? So I really, I'm trying to find like the right words to kind of describe the sentiment, but it's really being authentic and true. And there might be a lot of sort of training and initiatives on DEIB initiatives, but action is what counts, right?
Yes.
Embodiment is what counts. Who are the people who are delivering certain kinds of messages? What is our responsibility as a collective in this DEIB work to notice what voices or, what opportunities are not being kind of granted or presented. And when you really take the time and you invest the time to provide these kinds of opportunities for sometimes, difficult conversations, with the goal in mind that this is for the greater good. That way you and I can show up the way we know we want to or can. And there's that trust that's been built, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, coming out of, this is our first year, I don't want to say official year, but, now that we've shared the results of our survey, and, that allowed us to take sort of a snapshot of the current climate and figure out, what our next, what are our initiatives for the coming year. And gaining trust from folks who would like to be involved, or folks that maybe are still unsure, not sure how they feel about the committee or some of the initiatives that we mentioned during the staff meeting. And yeah, I think the first part, like you said, is transparency and also gaining trust, but also being welcoming to, Daisy and I talked about this yesterday. If you'd like to join a meeting, join our meeting and hear about what we're working on. And if and that could be the first of many, or maybe just the only meeting you attend. And that's okay. It's okay.
Exactly. And if you set the tone of like it's an open call, the invitation is always there.
Exactly.
Come as you want, come as you will. And whether you are there just to listen and absorb, that's okay too. And if you're there to, impart and encourage and contribute, yes. So just show up is
Just
kind
show
of
up, right?
yeah, because and I tell, this is a constant refrain that I also have, and I use it both personally and professionally, and most especially as a parent. It's like, I'd rather you ask than not ask, because if you don't, you'll never know. And there's no harm in asking, because regardless of the answer, at least there's something on the other side that you can whatever outcome there is, you can move on accordingly.
Right.
So the not asking, or the kind of not being sure if, am I invited? Can I go? If you don't raise your hand and say, oh, may I?
Right.
I mean, there's also a way of asking,
yes,
right?
Absolutely.
It's not like you can't just insert yourself, but there's a, tact and diplomacy, but also kind of ownership and right to ask permission, because you may not always be welcome in certain spaces, but at least you've, checked on your account that, okay, maybe I shouldn't go to this thing, but maybe that thing might be a better opportunity, but you have to ask.
You have to ask. And this came up yesterday during my conversation with Daisy, in terms of college experiences and what we experience as being one of very few people of color on campus. And when I say on campus, I really mean on campus, one of very many few in my experience. And having difficulty asking questions, because I was very introverted and shy, and didn't really know who to go to. And so, I'm just imagining students now coming here to Yale, and if you're introverted and shy, how do we as staff help those individuals? Because there are always going to be the individuals who have no problem speaking up, or have no problem asking questions, and that's great. That's great that they have that drive. But for the students who don't have that and are unsure, and Daisy and I talked about how she grew up in kind of a community. So it was her immediate family, but also her extended family. And they took care of each other. But not everyone has that. So you don't, if you feel isolated, if you don't have that around you. And I guess, so my point is, like you said, speaking up, or learning how to speak up, but also from the other side, helping people and giving them a platform to feel comfortable enough. Like we talked about in Emerge, we talked about psychological safety, and, feeling comfortable enough to be able to feel that it's a safe space to be able to ask questions, even if they're uncomfortable questions. Or
So I have, something to add to that. And I really, appreciate sort of you providing this in context, because yes, there are the extroverts, but there are also the introverts, and again, when you're kind of casting the wide net and scanning the room, who are the people who are more comfortable or proficient, or speaking their mind, versus the ones who are quietly observing, and maybe after the fact may come up to you and say,
Right.
you know, what you said was
Exactly.
great, or, you know, I was thinking the same thing. So, you know, for those people, or for those kind of folks who are kind of watchful and waiting, you know, all the more reason for them to be in those spaces, because eventually, you know, the opportunity will come for them to, you know, share and speak up, because the safe space has been created because the invitation has been offered.
Right, right.
Whereas maybe before they were hesitant or didn't ask, you know, can I come, or may I just come in? And so, and it takes different iterations and people's degree of comfort
Right.
as to how they emerge,
Yes,
no
yes.
pun intended,
Right.
differs. And that requires some patience and, you know, an acknowledgement that it's okay. You show up as how, you know, how you want. There's no expectation, but by you being in that space, you're adding value.
Right. Exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
So,
that's a great point.
and back to our 18-year-old selves.
Yes.
You know, when I came to college, I was an international student. You know, at the time, you know, we were living in Egypt, and, you know, my parents put me on a plane, and I arrived with my 2 suitcases.
Wow.
And, you know, it came from the desert to the tundra. So, like, culturally,
Yeah.
or just adjusting to the weather. I mean, all of that happened, even though I was able to acculturate pretty quickly, but so much so that I just sort of conformed and went with the flow, didn't ask questions, didn't know who to ask. I just sort of followed what was done around me.
Right.
Because that was easy. And, you know, I kept parts of myself maybe muted. And, you know, over time and experience, obviously, you realize that, you know, the only person that maybe suffered from this experience was yourself. Right? Like,
Absolutely.
and if I could redo, I was like, if I had the kind of, you know, confidence and proficiency that I have now as a 21-year-old, God, I would have been like amazing.
Exactly.
I am amazing.
Right. You are amazing.
No, just tongue in cheek, totally.
Yes,
but I
yes.
like all those sort of like possibilities or opportunities that I may have missed because I held myself back, or I quieted myself, or I was too cautious, too hesitant. And frankly, you know, as a woman of color, you know, there are all these other sort of kind of expectations and obligations that I felt I needed to abide by, which now as an adult, I'm like, well, maybe not so much.
Exactly.
Right? And that's actually a regret that I have. So now, in terms of my conversations with students and people that I work with, people that I mentor, I've served through the Working Women's Network as a mentor to a couple of younger kind of emerging staff.
I didn't realize that.
So, you know, that's sort of some of the pearls of kind of, you know, experience that I try to impart is that, you know, you know, use the opportunities and access that you have now to open the doors wider. You know, I necessarily, you know, I access those doors much later, but you have it now.
Right, right.
And so what does that mean? To really take advantage of the opportunities that come your way.
Yeah.
And because you won't know until you try or until you ask. So
that's great. Yeah, I agree. I have same regrets. You know, it's I didn't ask questions, or you know, there were times I made assumptions that, oh,
yeah,
you know, maybe I can't be part of this for whatever reason. Whether
we self-selected or we
Yes.
kind of self-censored, just because, again, what our experience was 30 plus years ago. I mean, the world is so much
So
more
different,
different.
right?
And thankfully,
Yes.
we are still able to reflect on what we did in the past, and it kind of has informed how we are operating now.
Absolutely.
And testament to us being in the Emerge program and having a little kind of access and subset of, I think, through our Emerge colleagues, maybe we had some similar lived experiences, right?
Absolutely.
As we were moving through our professional lives. And, what a perfect time for us, I think, to be acknowledged and be appreciated, but also know that we provide value and can contribute significantly. Even if it's on a one-on-one basis or like 2 or 3 people on either side of us, that in and of itself, I think, is enough because the ripple effects will continue.
Ripple effect, yes, definitely. So I'm curious for you, and I can share. During Emerge, do you feel that there was sort of a pivotal moment, as we, and I'm saying a lot, but we
That's
tried
an
to
inside
avoid
joke.
it, right? It's an inside joke. We tried to avoid it.
We'll calibrate our ums, likes, and after this, but
Exactly.
we're having a beautiful conversation.
I enjoy the natural flow of a conversation. But so during Emerge, as we went through, we did the readings, we had lots of presentations, lots of exercises and interactions with our cohort, our cohort, as well as the previous cohort, speakers and so on. And I'm curious if there was sort of a pivotal moment as you're sitting there listening to all of these things, and I'm not sure if it happened for you, but where there's a moment where it just all sort of clicks and you start thinking, yeah, why do I hold myself back, or why am I doing these things, and it's time to stop.
Yeah.
Did you have one of those moments where
Well, I think what was the most like the natural kind of progression of the experience, because obviously hearing from, various different Yale leaders and actually going behind the curtain to see how what's the metaphor, sausage is made?
Yeah, exactly.
Or I might mix my metaphors. I don't know. But, like for everything from like the financial aspects of this university to some of the kind of the strategic long-term and short-term planning, like all of that was actually very fascinating and affirming. I'm like, I'm part of something that, there is, even though the messaging or the optics publicly might present a certain way, there is a lot of thought behind it. And there are people who are giving this work a lot of thought, careful thought. And so that I found, very comforting. And obviously I take pride in being part of this institution and, my contributions and support of during my time here. But the sessions with Heidi Brooks, obviously she was at the beginning and at the end. And those were nice bookends because, it spoke to sort of identity and DEI, like if we look across the room, like why are we here? And I think that kind of clicked in a way that we do belong and we can contribute. And the exercise she had us do where we had to write, do you remember what it was?
I'm trying to remember the prompt. We had to write.
like just something about our experience or a reflection, because she had she read a piece of hers about like where she came from, like
and that stood out in my
exactly we might have all, what does pedigree mean?
Yes.
And that again I've been thinking about a lot. And I remember the piece that I decided to read, and this will be maybe a poem someday, is who has access to access? And there, how is access given? How is access shared? And how is access selective?
Yeah.
And I think that was sort of like the aha moment, because we were at the end of our program, and there are certain benchmarks and expectations that we have individually, and then as a group as we are moving on. And that stood out to me as something to really carefully think about. And my role in sort of, I speak to being a bridge builder and a connector that requires access. So how can I, create these kinds of spaces for all the people that I interact with and interface with meaningfully, so that, again, as we scan the room and we're thinking about which voices might be quieter or muted, providing that access so that eventually those voices can be heard more louder and clearer. Thank you.
Awesome. Yeah, that's excellent. I had a similar moment where I felt like, like you said, it was a moment of feeling that sense of belonging, but also figuring out what do I have to offer someone else to, like you said, to be like a conduit to something greater. And it also, I'm trying to remember what that prompt was, but
I know I have to. It's like bothering
I have to
me.
go back and
look at
my notebook. But I do remember that as I was writing, and I can't remember if it was one of our other cohort members who just mentioned, would their parents or their ancestors ever imagine that their descendant would be in this position, working at Yale, and doing what we do, and that really struck me for myself, because my parents grew up in the South, and they did farm work, and would my ancestors ever imagine that I could be sitting here today talking to you, and that I work in IT and do all these things? That it really struck me, because it was like, that's it's pretty amazing thought. And how do I contribute? How do I become a vehicle for someone else to do this and more?
Yes.
And and I can go on all day about how I've been trying to be more mindful about that, and what I do, and what I whatever I have in my power to accomplish right now. We participating in New Haven Promise and doing all of these other things. And that was a moment for me, because I felt like, wow, I wish I had access to a lot of these things when I was younger, but I didn't. But here I am, here I am. But what can I?
Now you do. And
now
so
I
what
do.
does it mean to, open that door?
For someone else.
For someone else.
Yeah.
And, that translates to sort of, when I think about, my role at Trumbull College, right? I think we're the first South Asian and Muslim heads of a college at Yale.
Yeah.
And, that comes with great responsibility. It's also very humbling
Yes.
because, being the first that shouldn't be the qualifier.
Right.
It should be, through merit or whatever, whatever the access has been, has been a journey, right? So what does this responsibility mean? What does it mean to sort of embody who we are, our true selves, in a really open and inclusive way? And, I think about that in my role as an ambassador of sorts, spokesperson, a mentor, a guide, a teacher. I mean, I'm trying to think of all the fun adjectives.
All the hats, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And this all speaks to, our time is temporary and transitional because we have people who will follow.
Right.
And, maybe the immigrant kind of mentality in me is like, whatever I've worked hard to achieve has been through my own kind of toil. I mean, it wasn't necessarily handed to me, even though I had access, through my upbringing. And I had a lot of blessings through and opportunities thanks to, my parents having certain access, right? But at the end of the day, all of that is taken with humility because these are fleeting, and you have to sort of remember and appreciate what it took to get here. And I have tremendous appreciation and gratitude for my ancestors. Would they have imagined that I'd be here, talking to, and when I think about, my husband and the role that he's in,
Right.
So it's a lot of sort of, if that isn't humbling, then I don't know what is.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yes.
And it's with tremendous humility and appreciation and responsibility that we take on this role.
That's amazing. And this is
Do you
great.
have all the feels?
Yeah,
Grace?
I've got all the feels, and I told Daisy yesterday, it's like my brain goes off in 20 directions, and wouldn't this be great? Wouldn't that be great? I have to get better at writing down my ideas. That's something I did learn in Emerge. You have those moments, like I'll have moments, and I have to get better at capturing those things, but that's a whole other conversation. So we're almost at the end of our time. And, there are two big things that I think came up today, which is access and responsibility. And I'm wondering if you have anything that you'd like to close with along those lines in terms of our responsibility. And when I think of responsibility, I think of responsibility to ourselves, but it's almost like a multiple circles, right? Responsibility to ourselves, responsibility to our sort of inner circle, and then responsibility to our community. And then, like you said, access, and what do we do with access, and access to access, right? And
that's going to be my memoir, by the way.
And so I'd love to hear,
sure,
if you have some closing thoughts on those two things.
That's such a beautiful way to kind of summarize our conversation because, one of the opportunities I had during the pandemic was to immerse myself in the training and teaching and learning and certification of restorative justice practices because it informs the work that I do at the UWC, but just personally as well. And one of the founding fathers of the work, Howard Zare, has He's obviously written a lot, but he has these kind of mantras of 10 ways to live restoratively.
Oh, yes.
And it speaks to a lot of the themes that we've covered today.
Right.
And he has 10 ways, but I wanted to highlight 4.
Okay.
Okay? So 10 ways to live restoratively.
Okay.
Take relationships seriously, envisioning yourself in an interconnected web of people, institutions, and the environment.
Mm.
Involve those affected by a decision as much as possible in the decision-making process. Listen deeply and compassionately to others, seeking to understand even if you don't agree with them. Think about who you want to be in the latter situation rather than just being right. Engage in dialogue with others, even when what is being said is difficult, remaining open to learning from them and the encounter. And finally, sensitively confront everyday injustices, including sexism, racism, and classism. So these are just a couple. I mean, he has 10 total, but I guess I have one more because this one just popped out at me.
Sure.
I should have just read the whole list because they're just so beautiful.
Yes.
So this will be like my closing kind of Zare kind of teaching that I'll read.
Okay.
Treat everyone respectfully, even those you don't expect to encounter again, even those you feel don't deserve it, even those who have harmed or offended you or others. So again, grace, compassion, dignity, respect.
Right.
Be true to yourself. Continue, on your path forward. And if somebody isn't kind of with you yet or maybe hesitant, that's on them, not you.
Mm-hmm.
So
That's beautiful.
Thank you.
Thank you for sharing that. And I think it speaks volumes to who you are and what I've experienced with you and from literally the day I met you.
It was love at first sight.
Yeah, it was love at first sight. It was. It makes such a huge difference when you, like you said, when you encounter someone, even if it's going to be for a couple minutes or, for us, it was several months, but that first 10 seconds can make such an impact on someone, whether, I'm always conscious of smiling at someone if I'm passing through, or if I meet you for the first time. I try to be conscious of those moments because it can either, like you said, the recipient can do what they will with it, but sometimes it can make such a difference with someone. And and like I said, all of that kind of, I see it in you because that is how you were the day I first met you. And
Thank you.
Yeah, it was just a very warm, I didn't know you, but it was like, wow, I feel like I know you because it was just that immediate hospitality and that immediate warm interaction and leading to me, okay, I want to know more. I would love to get to know this person. And I just really appreciate that. And I feel it has a ripple effect. I think it absolutely, like I said, could be a few seconds to, if you interact with someone regularly. So, yes.
I firmly believe that you're supposed to meet the people you do at certain moments in your life, and there's a
Yes.
reason.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yes.
So the fact that we met when we did at this juncture of our lives, there is a rhyme and a reason for it.
Yes.
And it will continue to show up in these kinds of, partnerships and
Yes, yes.
collaborations. And how lucky are we?
Right.
So what a
Absolutely.
blessing that is. So
It
thank
is.
you.
Thank you.
No,
I
thank
really
you.
appreciate it.
Let's just
Like,
keep
no,
going. Thank you.
Yeah. But no, truly, again, we're at our time, but thank you so much, Anita. I really, truly appreciate that you've taken the time to chat with me and just your support. You've been very supportive
I'm
of
your
this
number one
project.
fan, my friend.
I appreciate that. Share it with your friends.
Yes.
Please share the link. And as you know, we're going to post the podcast on Spotify. We have all of our social media set up. So we have our Instagram, Yale College Voices. I'm just really excited to see what impact it may have. And like I said, if it's just one person,
for the one person that's listening,
the one person,
thank you for listening.
Exactly. I think it's so important. We pass lots of folks all day, every day, right? But you don't know the story behind that person until you take time to get to know them. And, I just hope that in the hour that we spent together, that if it has that impact on that one person, that then, the podcast is a success to me. So thank you so much, Anita. And yes, thank you for your support. And again, it was just lovely speaking with you today. So
my pleasure. Thank you.
So thank you.